I never meant to call her that, my boss. It slipped out the first week I started, half joking, half nervous. She only raised an eyebrow, set her coffee down, and said very calmly, "Then obey me completely." I laughed. She didn't. And the silence that followed has never really left me. Most mornings, the office feels like a waiting room, stale air, hum of the copier, the cheap clock ticking too loudly. I arrive earlier than I need to, mostly because my apartment feels emptier than the office ever could. I sit at my desk with a paper cup of coffee that's always too hot, scrolling through messages I never send. A cousin I should call back. A friend I owe an apology to. My thumb hovers, then drops the phone face down. Always the same loop. That's usually when she walks in. Not dramatic, never that. Just the sound of her heels on the hallway tile, the soft click of the door closing. Mid-40s, precise but not showy. She carries herself like someone who has lived through louder storms than this place will ever see. I don't stare, but I notice things. The way she balances her thermos by the cap. How her hand lingers a second on the doorframe before she lets go. She doesn't look around the room much, but when her eyes pass over me, it feels like she's read more than I meant to show. One Tuesday, the rain hadn't stopped since dawn. Everyone else complained, but she just shook the water from her coat and set it neatly on the back of her chair. I said something small. "Guess summer's gone for good." She glanced at me, lips barely tugging into a smile. "It was never really here." That was all. I should have gone back to work. But I kept hearing that line long after. The truth is, attraction wasn't sudden. It was in fragments. The pause before she answered an email, the dry humor under her breath when the printer jammed again, the way she remembered I take my coffee black, even though I'd only said it once. She'd set a fresh cup on my desk without a word, then move on as if nothing had happened. I'd sit there, steam curling into the stale air, not knowing whether to thank her or stay quiet. Sometimes I wonder if she notices my habits too. The way I fold napkins into sharp squares when I'm thinking. Or how my eyes drift toward her hands when she types, steady, deliberate, no wasted motion. Maybe she doesn't notice at all. Maybe that's better. Last Friday, the office emptied early. Long weekend ahead, everyone rushing to beat the traffic. I lingered, packing slowly. She was still in her office with the light on, door slightly ajar. I could see her silhouette against the shelves. I thought about saying goodnight. I thought about asking her if she ever minded staying late. Instead, I stood there too long, until she looked up and caught me. Our eyes met through the crack of the door. No words, just the sound of the clock down the hall. I muttered something. "See you Tuesday." My voice came out thinner than I meant. She tilted her head, almost amused, and nodded once. I left before she could say anything. That night, just past midnight, my phone buzzed. A message I wasn't expecting. 4 words, nothing more. "Come in tomorrow." Alone. I stared at the screen, my hand frozen halfway between setting it down and replying. The rain outside had finally stopped, but the silence in the room felt heavier than ever. I went in the next morning, though it wasn't a workday. The office was empty, silent enough that every step echoed back at me. Her door was half open, as if she had been waiting. She didn't greet me with instructions. Instead, she was sitting at her desk with 2 mugs of tea already set down, steam still rising. "Coffee makes sense for weekdays," she said without looking up. "But weekends need something quieter." I sat across from her, trying not to make it obvious that my hands were restless, folding the napkin she'd left near the tray. "Green tea plain?" I took a sip too quickly, burning my tongue. She noticed, of course, though she pretended not to. There was a pause before she said, almost idly, "I used to spend Saturdays driving. Just miles and miles, no place to end up. My son hated it. He said it felt like being trapped in motion." I blinked. She'd never mentioned a son before. I wanted to ask, but her eyes were somewhere else, far beyond the wall. The silence grew, and I felt clumsy breaking it. "Do you still do that? The driving?" She shook her head. "He's grown now. Doesn't need to sit in the passenger seat anymore. A small smile, faint, like the kind you only wear when you're half remembering. The weight of that admission hung between us. Not heavy, but undeniable. I thought about my own empty apartment, the unsent messages in my phone, the silence that greets me when I unlock the door at night. I wanted to say all that. I didn't. Instead, I asked, "Was it the driving you missed, or the company?" She glanced at me then, eyes steady, sharper than I expected. For a second I wished I could take the question back. But she only tilted her head. Maybe both. That was all. Still, it felt like too much. The risk of it crept in around the edges, the years between us, the way I called her boss, that first week, the knowledge that if anyone else walked in now, the whole thing would look like something it shouldn't. I could almost hear the imagined voices. "She's old enough to be your mother. You're just another distraction. You'll regret this." But she didn't move away. She poured more tea. The sound of it filling the cup seemed louder than the rain against the windows. We talked about nothing and everything after that. Traffic, books either of us had finished, the stubborn office printer. It wasn't the words that mattered. It was the pauses, the way her hand brushed mine briefly when she slid the sugar packet closer, the fact that she didn't pull it back too quickly. When I left, she walked me to the door. No reason for it. She could have stayed behind her desk, kept the distance. But as I stepped into the hallway, she reached out as if to adjust my collar. Her fingers lingered an unnecessary second. It was nothing. Just fabric between her hand and mine. But I don't know why that moment stayed with me. Maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. By the third week, our weekends had become a kind of unspoken ritual. Not every Saturday, but enough that when I found myself heading toward the office on a quiet morning, I already half expected her to be there. This time, though, the air felt different. She had the blinds half drawn, the room dimmer than usual. Papers stacked neatly, her coat still draped over the chair as though she hadn't settled in. "Early again," I said. My voice sounded too casual, like I was trying to hide something. She only hummed, not looking up from the file she was closing. "Habit." I sat, folding a napkin into smaller and smaller squares, waiting for her to glance at me the way she usually did. She didn't. And that silence, heavier than anything she might have said, began to sink into me. Finally, she pushed the file aside and looked straight at me. "People will notice if you keep coming in like this." I froze. There it was, the line drawn, sharp and simple. "I just thought you thought." She cut in gently, not cruel, just final. "And that's the problem." The words hung there. My throat tightened. I wanted to ask what she meant, whether I had misread everything, whether all those small moments had been nothing but kindness. But before I could, the sound of footsteps echoed down the hallway. A colleague, one of the interns, barely older than me, poked his head in. "Oh, sorry, didn't know anyone was here." His eyes flicked between us, curious, too quick, then gone again with a muttered excuse. The door shut, but it left something behind. A tension neither of us acknowledged out loud. She exhaled, long, as if the interruption had only confirmed her point. "You see?" I nodded, though I didn't really. My hands wouldn't stay still. I smoothed the napkin flat, then folded it again, sharper this time. She rose, moved toward the shelves, fingertips brushing the spines of books she wasn't reading. "This isn't simple." I should have agreed. I should have laughed it off. Instead, I found myself saying, quietly, "Nothing worth anything ever is." That stopped her. Just for a moment. Her shoulders tensed, then softened. She turned slightly, enough that I could see her profile in the dim light. Not a smile. Not quite. We stayed like that, distance measured in more than feet, until she stepped back toward the desk. She placed the folder down, close to my hand. Too close. My fingers shifted instinctively, brushing the edge of hers. Neither of us moved away right away. I looked up. Her eyes held mine, steady, unreadable, but not cold. For a second, one heartbeat, maybe two, the space between us seemed thin enough to break with just one reckless choice. But she pulled back first. A small, deliberate step. A breath she held longer than she needed. "You should go," she said softly. And I did. But the moment clung to me all the way home, sharper than any confession could have been. It was late when I caught her leaving the office. The others had gone hours ago, the building nearly hollow, stairwell lights buzzing faintly. She hesitated at the door when she saw me waiting outside, as if debating whether to pretend not to notice. "You're still here," she said. Not a question. I shrugged, falling into step beside her as we walked toward the parking lot. The evening air was cool, faint smell of rain still clinging to the asphalt. We didn't head to our cars right away. Instead, without planning it, we stopped at the small bench tucked under the awning. She sat first. I followed. Silence stretched. Finally, she spoke. "You know, people are starting to ask questions." Her tone was steady, but her hands betrayed her, fingers laced too tightly, knuckles pale. "About what?" I asked, though I already knew. Her eyes flicked toward me, then away. "Why you linger? Why I don't stop you?" The words dug into me, sharper than I expected. I wanted to protest, to insist it wasn't like that. But the truth was, it was like that. Maybe worse. Because the silence between us tonight felt fuller than any answer I could give. She exhaled slowly, as though she had been holding back for weeks. "You remind me of things I try to forget. Being seen. Being wanted." The last word nearly broke. I stared at her, throat tight, unsure if I had the right to say anything at all. But something inside me cracked, the part that had been folding napkins and swallowing words. "And you make me feel like I don't have to keep pretending I'm fine." Her gaze met mine then, steady, unflinching. For once, no barrier. Just tired honesty. The sound of a car door slamming across the lot made us both flinch, but no one looked our way. She leaned back slightly, her shoulders pressed against the cold metal of the bench. "Do you realize how dangerous this is?" she asked quietly. "Yeah." My voice was rougher than I intended. "But I can't seem to stop showing up." That made her laugh, soft, almost bitter. "And I can't seem to stop letting you." The air thickened around us. My hand shifted on the bench, closer to hers, not touching but close enough to feel the warmth radiating. The kind of closeness that made every breath a question. Her lips parted like she might say something else, but no words came. Just silence, long and unbroken, until she finally whispered, "What happens if we don't pull back?" The night hung on that question, heavy and fragile. I had no answer. And maybe she didn't either. But neither of us moved. The following week, she wasn't at the office on Saturday. Or Sunday. No note, no text. Just absence. I told myself it didn't matter, that I wasn't owed her time, her presence. But every morning I still found myself checking, waiting for the sound of her heels in the hallway, the faint scrape of her chair against the floor. Nothing. By Tuesday, the silence had a weight of its own. I caught glimpses of her during the workday, always busy, always surrounded. She didn't linger at my desk, didn't leave coffee without a word. She moved through the building like someone who had drawn her borders overnight. At first I thought I'd done something wrong. Maybe I had. Maybe she regretted the bench, the closeness, the question that had hung between us. I almost asked, twice, maybe 3 times. But each time, my voice failed before it reached the air. It wasn't until Friday that I overheard someone mention it. A passing comment near the copier. "Her son's back in town. Staying with her for a while." I froze, the stack of papers in my hand suddenly too heavy. Of course. That explained everything. The way she disappeared into herself. The way she had cut off our quiet rituals without a word. That night I saw them, just a glimpse. She and a man not much younger than me, maybe a few years older. Carrying groceries up the steps to her building, arguing lightly about something small. He laughed. She smiled, and it wasn't the faint, cautious smile she gave me. It was something freer. Something that didn't need hiding. I stood there on the sidewalk longer than I should have, feeling like I'd stepped into a scene that wasn't mine. Back home, I scrolled through my phone, thumb hovering over her name. I typed out a message, "Do you want to talk?" Deleted it. Wrote another, "I miss RT." Deleted that too. My screen lit the room, pale and cold. In the end, I left the phone face down, unsent words still burning. The weekend came and went without her. Monday arrived. The office filled with its usual noise. I sat at my desk, folding a napkin into smaller and smaller squares, waiting for something. She passed by once, brief eye contact, a nod that felt too professional. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused. Like life forgot to finish the sentence. Her office light stayed on late that night. I almost walked down the hall, almost knocked on the door. Instead, I turned back. The sound of the copier, the hum of the fluorescent lights, filled the space where her voice should have been. The chair across from mine stayed empty. And I left it that way. It was raining again when I finally saw her outside of work. Not at the office, not behind a desk. Just her, standing under the awning of her building, paper bag of groceries tucked against her side, waiting for the downpour to ease. I almost walked past. Almost let the silence stretch another week, another month. But my feet slowed before my mind did, and suddenly I was beside her, rain dripping from my jacket, words caught somewhere between my chest and throat. She looked at me like she hadn't expected to, like she'd been preparing for every possibility except this one. "You shouldn't be here," she said quietly. "I know." My voice was rough, but steady. I didn't want it to end like that." The bag shifted in her arms. I reached out instinctively, steadying it with one hand. Our fingers brushed, small, clumsy, but it stopped the air between us from collapsing. "I wasn't trying to hurt you," she said after a pause. Her voice was softer now, the kind you use when you don't want the neighbors to hear. "It's just, when my son came back, I remembered who I'm supposed to be. Not this." She gestured faintly between us. The words stung more than I wanted to admit. I should have let it go. But I couldn't. "You don't have to explain. Just tell me if it meant nothing. If I imagined all of it." Her eyes closed for a second, lashes damp from the mist in the air. When she opened them, they didn't flinch away. "No. You didn't imagine it." Silence again. The kind that feels heavier than speech. Cars passed, splashing water against the curb, but neither of us moved. "I don't know what to do with it," she admitted, voice breaking just slightly. "I'm too old to pretend this is simple. Too tired to risk making a mistake I can't take back." I swallowed hard, every impulse telling me to reach for her, to close the space. But instead I said, "Then maybe we don't do anything. Maybe we just admit it was real." Her lips parted, then closed again. A faint smile, sad but honest, curved at the edges. "You make it sound so easy." "It's not," I said. "But I'd rather leave knowing we saw each other than keep pretending we didn't." For a moment, she just looked at me, as if memorizing something she'd never say out loud. Then she reached up, not a kiss, not a promise, just her hand against my cheek, warm despite the cold rain. "Okay," she whispered. That was all. No more. No less. And somehow, it was enough. Time didn't stop after that night under the awning. It didn't shift into some new, shining chapter either. It just kept going, quietly, stubbornly. Days filled themselves with the same routines: morning coffee, the hum of the office printer, the clock at 8:47 a.m. ticking louder than it should. But something between us had changed. Not in a way others could see. To them, she was still the steady boss who kept the office from falling apart, and I was just another junior, head bent over reports. Yet there was a new rhythm tucked inside the ordinary. Some mornings she'd slide a cup of tea onto my desk instead of coffee. No comment, no explanation. Just steam curling up, familiar now. Other mornings, I'd leave a fresh black coffee outside her office door before she arrived. We never mentioned it. The small exchanges were enough. On certain evenings, when the office was finally empty, she'd pause at my desk as if remembering something. "Walk me out," she'd ask, though we both knew she didn't need the company. We'd sit on the same bench under the awning, talking about nothing in particular: traffic, books still unfinished, the stubborn printer again. It wasn't about the words. It was about sitting in silence without it feeling empty. She never made declarations. Neither did I. But when her son left town again, she mentioned it to me before anyone else. Just that, no details, no long explanations. It was enough to know she trusted me with the shape of her life, even the quiet corners. I noticed her hands more than I used to. The way they curled around her thermos cap, the way she tapped a pen against her folder when thinking. Sometimes I'd catch her looking at mine, folding napkins into neat squares out of habit. When our eyes met, we both looked away, but not quickly. It wasn't perfect. There were weeks when she pulled back, busy, distant, guarding herself. And weeks when I did the same. But the pause no longer felt final. It felt like breathing: inhale, exhale, retreat, return. Months later, one late Friday, we found ourselves again on that bench. Rain misted in the air, softer this time. She glanced at the clock tower across the street. 8:47, she murmured, as if to herself. I smiled. Always too loud. She laughed, quiet, shaking her head. Then she looked at me, steady and unflinching. No grand moment, no breaking point, just a soft truth between us. I think, she said slowly, this is enough. And I believed her. Not because it was perfect, but because it was real. Did this story stay with you? What kind of quiet, real love stories do you want to hear next?